Hello, if everyone could take their seats. I'm going to start the January 29th, 2024 meeting of the Fairfield RTM. Will the clerk take the roll?
Ken Astorita, Peter Britton, Melissa Longo, Brooks Baracino, Tara Cook-Littman, Amy O'Shea. Here. Dave Rock, Chris Shea, Mike Hardigan, Jeff Steele, Melissa Strauss, Cindy Waldron, here. Laura Carson, Michelle McCabe, Marcy Spallier, Liz Esma, Josh Garskoff, Kristen O'Neill, Sharon Stilley, Jay Walk, Jennifer Barahona, Rob Blanchard, Nancy Donnie, Andy Graceffa.
Here.
Steve Barretts, John Delgado, John Keenan, Scott Nickel, Carrie Burcham.
Here.
Chris Carroll, Colin Colburn, Christine Woodswiak, Drew Georgiadis, Lisa Havey, Mark McDermott, Karen Wackerman.
Here.
Matt Ambrose, Justin Contrato, Margaret Horton.
Here.
Pierre Ratsky.
Here.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's stand for the pledge. Thank you. We'll move on to item 2 on our agenda, which is to hear an address on the state of the town by our first selectman. Welcome, First Selectman Gerber. You could, if you want to go up to that podium, that's fine. That's in view as well.
Members of the RTM, distinguished guests, and my fellow citizens, it's a tremendous honor to be here as First Selectman, continuing this tradition of giving the annual State of the Town address to the representative town meeting. I've been in office for just over 2 months, and I'm prouder than ever to be a Fairfielder. I feel particularly fortunate to find myself working with as many talented and dedicated employees, department heads, and volunteers. There are too many to name individually, but I want to thank each one of them for the warm welcome they've given me and for their commitment to serving the public. Many of our current residents grew up in Fairfield or went to college here and stayed here. Take it from me, this speaks volumes for what Fairfield has to offer. I don't hear many young people say, I'm out of here, never coming back when they graduate from high school. So yes, things are good here, but our increasing popularity brings challenges. Looking ahead over the next decade, where do we want to be? My vision is that we want to be a community where people want to and can afford to live, work, and retire. We want to maintain the quality of our schools. Not only are they educating our future leaders, but our education system drives our property values. We want to become a more walkable, likable, and sustainable town for all ages and abilities, so people of all ages and abilities can enjoy healthier lifestyles and greater attachment to their community. And we want to live amid vibrant business districts to drive employment, revenue, and convenience. How do you do that? We have to be more strategic about our planning and investments. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll describe where I think we need to focus our long-term planning efforts and how I see a budget developing to support that. I'll also touch on some specific issues and initiatives that are timely. Let's begin with commercial and residential development. Fairfield was already a great town when I moved here 28 years ago. But in my opinion, great for Fairfield is underachieving. Fairfield can be much more. My wife Jessica and I chose to move here in 1996, despite the fact that downtown businesses were struggling. The Fairfield store just closed. The Howard Johnson's on Post Road closed within several months. There weren't many choices for eating out with the kids, mainly Sidetracks and Mackenzie's. For adults, there were only a few nice choices in town, so we usually went to Westport on date nights. The opening of Joe's American Bar and Grill signaled a new day for young families, and there were times we waited 45 minutes to get in. And the redevelopment of the Fairfield store property was another milestone. The success of our vibrant neighborhoods and commercial districts is tied partly to demographic shifts. Our underlying home property values are inextricably linked to our excellent public school system. Other impacts on our success are highly educated workforce, access to rail and airports are positioned along the I-95 corridor between New York City and Boston, 2 private universities, and top-notch public services. Our town offers urban-style amenities in a suburban-style setting. Some prior administrations have taken positions controversial at the time. That ultimately turned out to be positive for the town. The Metro Center is an example. There were epic battles about whether that project in any form should be allowed to happen. Now, in the opinion of many, including myself, we are looking at a very exciting area that could and should be a significant driver of our grand list and tax revenue, could create a unique retail, restaurant, social, and art scene with connectivity to an increasingly vibrant Black Rock section of Bridgeport and is easily accessible by train and automobile. We've had a lot of residential development in Fairfield, and there is legitimate concern over zoning applications under state statute 8-30G, which allows developers to bypass most local zoning laws for residential complexes if at least 30% of the units meet the state's definition of affordable. The town expects that this year we will obtain the 433 points, the 433 points we need to achieve a 4-year moratorium from 8-30G. That's good news. But 4 years will go by very quickly. During that period, we must use every tool we have in our toolkit to work towards our next moratorium with housing that is affordable and attractive for all ages, including seniors, and also doesn't negatively impact the feel of our neighborhoods. A few important things were developed around World War II. Penicillin, radar, and our sewage system. Fairfield has avoided appropriate investments in this area for decades. Now our sewage system has become a limiting factor to growing our grand list. The flow, as it's called, from planned and proposed development is too much for some of our existing lines. Development at the Metro Center, for example, cannot proceed without a new trunk line, work that is currently in progress. Additional development on the Post Road corridor from Westport into town is also limited by our sewer system. Our town sewer system and sewage treatment plant may be nearing its capacity, but that is in large part due to a collection system that is permeable to rain, ground, and at times salt water. Inflow and infiltration, as this is known, can be more than 50% of what flows through our lines. Flushing your toilet is something we pretty much take for granted. I'd like that to continue. Water Pollution Control Authority's infrastructure over the next 10 plus years. I'd like that to continue. And so town bodies will be discussing tens of millions of dollars of necessary investments in our Water Pollution Control Authority's infrastructure over the next 10 plus years. Long-term strategic planning for our sewer system is critical, both for our current usage and to enable future growth. Paying for our school system is largely a local responsibility in Connecticut, and the Fairfield Public School budget accounts for about 60% of our total budget. Starting in the 1980s, as school enrollment declined, Fairfield began closing and repurposing schools as a way to save money. Mill Hill, Osborne Hill, Oldfield, and Grassmere elementary schools were closed. Instead of building a dedicated senior center and affordable senior housing, Oldfield and Grassmere, both almost completely Walker schools, were permanently repurposed. Ludlow High School was closed and Ward expanded to absorb those students. Then what happened? Over the following years, as the population again rebounded, Mill Hill, Osborne Hill, and Ludlow High School had to be reopened. A new elementary school, Burr, had to be built, and about 60 portables installed. What was the tab for all of this? About $140 million in 1980s, 90s, and early $2000. You could safely double that amount or more to get a sense of the cost in today's dollars. The town spent an exorbitant amount of taxpayer money that could have been avoided by better long-term strategic planning. One cost of our popularity is increased traffic and dangerous rights of way. Today, all over the country, town planners are realizing that connecting neighborhoods through safe and attractive rights of way leads to healthier and happier societies. You will hear the term connectivity a lot over the coming years. Streets can be redesigned to slow down automobiles, and well-designed sidewalks, bike lanes, and paths can reduce our dependency on cars, driving foot traffic to our commercial areas and increasing economic activity. It may take Fairfield 20 years to be a complete streets town, but we must start the planning now if we are to deal with the increased population growth that we've seen over the last 20 years. We need to ensure a sustainable, livable town for everyone, children to seniors. We have one of the longest coastlines of any municipality in Connecticut, and resiliency to flooding is one of the biggest challenges we face as a town. We will be making large investments to repair and replace existing flood resiliency infrastructure over the coming years. Long-term strategic planning is essential for our residents near the coastline and within our river basin systems to mitigate flooding and damage. I've described 5 areas where long-term planning is vital to our success: commercial and residential development, our sewer system, schools, traffic, and flood resiliency. Let's talk about the impact on the budget and ultimately taxes. At a high level, we face some challenging cliffs in the fiscal 24-25 budget that are left from prior years. Over the past 4 years, we had significant increases in our grand list, an average of 2% per year, much of that from rising appraised values of existing real estate. This translated into an average of $6.5 million of tax revenue per year. One way to think of this is Fairfield was able to collect more tax dollars from property owners without impacting the tax rate, called the mill rate, to the same extent. The math for this translates to the following intertown budgets. Over the past 4 years, the average annual increase in the total expense budget line was 3.05%, while the mill rate increased by only 0.67%. This year, by contrast, the current grand list growth estimate is about 0.25%. So we will not realize the valuation benefits seen in recent years. At the same time, Fairfield borrowed significantly less in recent years by employing American Rescue Act, Plan Act funds, or ARPA, towards projects that would typically have been bonded or paid for out of the operating budget. Our cost of borrowing was down by $2 million last year. ARPA funds have been allocated and borrowing rates are now significantly higher. Our borrowing amounts will have to return to normal levels and will cost more than in the recent past. The Board of Education teachers' contract was renegotiated this year. Last year, our superintendent gave us the heads up that our teachers were significantly underpaid versus our peers, and our retention and new hire rates were dropping as a result. The new contract includes a 3-year increase of about 4.4% per year on average. The Board of Education proposed increase currently stands at about 5.4%. What does that mean? Well, the Board of Ed is about 60% of the total Fairfield budget, so that is a large increase. These are some of the challenges we face, and we are looking for ways to offset as much of these headwinds as possible. However, we know we can't compromise the level of services Fairfielders are used to and deserve. I just explained how important a long-term outlook is for planned growth. An equally important element is improving efficiencies throughout the town. We are blessed with many dedicated and talented employees. But in some areas, we are hamstrung by antiquated systems and processes. Recently, some of these deficits have led to well-publicized issues around internal controls. Addressing such problems effectively takes resources, not just money, but also time and attention of employees with the appropriate skill sets. Making appropriate investments to increase efficiencies and controls will ultimately save our taxpayers money. Finally, I'd like to talk to you about some issues that my administration is working on. The fill pile. Quick update on the fill pile. All but 2 sites have now been remediated, and the remaining work is happening now. Construction on the pavilion is scheduled to begin shortly, with work expected to be completed in the January to February 2025 timeframe, assuming it passes tonight. We continue to work with Connecticut Deep on how to address the fill pile itself to achieve a permanent resolution. At Wednesday's Board of Selectmen meeting, I will be accepting into the record the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force's blueprint that was originally submitted to the Board of Selectmen in January 2022. Members of that task force worked for 18 months on this blueprint, and this work has never been adequately acknowledged. 2 years later, most of the blueprint remains very relevant. At Wednesday's meeting, I will also be reading a proclamation regarding racism as a public health crisis. A few years ago, I received my master's in public health, and through my course of studies became more aware than ever about the impacts of racism on public health. I'm also committed to forming a permanent body to discuss issues of race in Fairfield and to propose solutions to make Fairfield a more inclusive community. Is the art scene in Fairfield thriving? You bet it is. We have so much artistic talent in Fairfield, including in our schools. I urge all of our artists in town to reach out to the newly formed Fairfield Arts Commission and let them know you are here. The mission of the Fairfield Arts Commission is to promote and celebrate the arts in the town of Fairfield, and we can brand and promote our art scene to make Fairfield known as a destination for the arts. Let's celebrate and support our form of highly participatory municipal democracy, but commit to making improvements where we can. I do believe that we need to reopen the charter revision process soon. The last charter referendum included one single question that combined many separate issues and may have failed for that reason. Some proposals were worthy of being broken out as separate questions, and I believe could have passed had they been. Many other needed changes were not proposed, but should be, as separate questions for the next referendum. Finally, a matter of great importance to all of us in Fairfield. There has been much discussion about United Illuminating's proposal to build massive monopoles through Fairfield and into Bridgeport, requiring permanent easements on over 19 acres of public property, both residential and commercial, and cutting down over 6 acres of trees and vegetation. I've made my views on their proposal clear in many different forums. I view UI's current proposal to be a significant economic threat to Fairfield, and I'm committed to fighting it. We now have some of the best legal representation on these matters in the state, and our administration confers with our lawyers on every aspect of this case regularly. I hope that you as RTM members and all of our residents will continue to support us by writing to Governor Lamont expressing your views. In conclusion, I want to say that as a former financial executive and a former RTM member, I believe we have a great combination of talent in this town to lead us into a bright future. We have 2 universities, a vibrant business community, quality schools, and services that support our residents at every stage of life. By focusing on strategic long-term planning, at the same time that we improve the blocking and tackling of running the town, I think we will be well positioned to capitalize on all that Fairfield has to offer. I ran for office to solve problems and get things done. I hope to engage all elected and appointed officials and all residents in finding solutions, because I truly do believe that we are better when we work together. Again, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. It's a tremendous honor.
Thank you, First Selectman Gerber, and I apologize for not letting you use the taller podium. We look forward to working with you together this term. We'll move on to item number 3, to receive the report from the First Selectman or his designee on leases of town properties. Town Attorney Phil Pierce is here to give us the report. You have to hold the thing down the entire time.
The entire time?
Yeah, it changed since you were moderator.
Good evening, Phil Pierce, Town Attorney. I was going to say that I was going to use the kids' podium, but I screwed it up by getting the microphone wrong. So This is the annual lease report. In the town code. An annual report is required to be given to the RTM. You have the written report. This is prepared by the internal auditor. The report lists the tenants, the addresses, base rent, additional rent, which is not the escalation. That's reflected in the base rent. The additional rent would be if there's any additional charges in addition to base rent, and then a notes column. As of her last review, which I believe was in December, the leases were all current in terms of payment. I'm happy to answer questions. I have copies of many of the leases, but not all of them. It depends on the particular tenant.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Attorney Pierce? Representative Ludwig-Sack. She's just going to have to come up to that.
Hi there, Christine Ludwig-Zach, District 8. I had a question, I guess through the moderator, please, regarding the property address 100 Mona Terrace, a child's garden, the first one. It looks like, I think that's the property adjacent to the Bigelow Senior Center. And they have 10,000 square feet there. Question is more so pertaining to their parking lot. I think they have maybe about 20 spaces. There's 4 signs that designate the parking spaces for a child's garden. Wondering how the remaining spaces, if their payment for the lease is allocated for all of those spaces. I guess the seniors from the Bigelow Center used to park there more often, but there's recently been signage restricting that. So wondering if that could be just addressed, the change. Thank you.
So thanks for the question. So this is a lease. I don't have the full document. I have the lease amendment to lease agreement. So I'll get a copy of the full lease and look at whether spaces are designated in particular. Something we can address if it's an issue for the senior center.
Probably shouldn't have sat down. If there's not anything designated in the lease, is that something that can be addressed for the coming year, just to kind of have that specified if they might be able to use some of those spaces like they had in the past?
So if there's nothing in the lease giving the tenant the right to designate spaces, we can work with them to figure out a way to have spaces that are designated, because that might be appropriate to do without impacting the seniors.
Thank you. If you get the information, you can just give it to me. Any other questions? Representative Cook-Littman.
Tara Cook-Littman, D2, through you, Madam Moderator. I have a question about Greenfield Farms up on Congress Street that is rented for $1. I'm just wondering if there's anything in the lease that talks about how the town is involved, what we benefit, if there's community events there. I live up by there and I just don't see much activity. So I'm just wondering if you can shed some light on why we rent it 10 acres up in Greenfield Hill for $1. Thank you.
So I'm not familiar with the history of that property to a great extent. I believe the lease just requires it to be used for agricultural purposes. There are some events that are held there that are open to the public. They do a number of events in the fall. So, I mean, that could be part of why the town has committed to that for a number of years.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Moderator. Do you know how many more years that is leased for? I didn't see it in the document. It may have been there.
The lease term runs through 2024, December 31, so end of this year.
Madam Moderator, may I follow up? So when it ends at the end of this year, do we have any idea what will happen then?
I mean, I would not be the one making that decision. That would be the administration. I don't believe there's been any discussion or decision about that, so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the leases? Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Bastilli, District 5, through you, Madam Moderator. For the leases where we charge $1, for instance, Pilot House comes to mind, do we, and there are others that are in the same situation, so I don't want to just single them out, but is there a process by which we can find out that if these properties are being used for the intention, like why we're giving these entities the benefit of a lease for $1? You know, like check in with them to make sure that the property is being used for the benefit of the townspeople so that we know that the lease should be continuing.
So most of the leases that are for $1 are to charitable organizations. I think, we could certainly do a review to make sure that they're being used for charitable purposes. I think most of these ones for $1 are, actual nonprofit entities. They are supposed to still go to the Board of Selectmen for approval, which has not always happened historically under the requirements of our charter, the ordinances, and state law, which, will happen going forward. So if there is a lease that's going to come up, it would be a public discussion.
And if that's the case, then when would they go before the Board of Selectmen again? Like, so we could do the review ahead in advance to know that we'd want to approve them again?
So that would be part of a lease renegotiation process with each particular tenant. I think if the tenant is within the term, early into a term of a lease, I don't know that it makes sense for the town to do a lot of work to make sure that they're complying with the lease, because the town might not have an actual remedy if they're in the space and utilizing it for their nonprofit, but not in the way we like. So I think it's really something to look at towards the end of a lease term to figure out whether it's a viable way to utilize town property, considering we don't have a lot of town property to utilize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9, through you, Madam Moderator, to Attorney Pierce. To follow up on Representative Pistilli's comment, these charitable organizations, do we have any process where we research them, make sure they've paid their taxes and they're in compliance? Do we use Charity Navigator or any kind of review like that? Or is this in the charter, or is this fall to the administration to evaluate these charities?
So I'm not aware of what process was that was historically used to evaluate the nonprofits. I mean, many of these are known organizations that do work in the community. So I have no reason to doubt their legitimacy as nonprofits. I mean, the only process that's dictated is that the Board of Selectmen are required to approve leases. If the lease is more than 3 years or more, then this body also has to approve it pursuant to our ordinance. Beyond that, there's no formal process that's dictated by either our ordinances or the town charter on this.
Thank you very much for that, for the leases. I hope there's also a process for any charity that works with the town. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the leases? If anyone has a question online regarding the leases from the body? Seeing none. Thank you, Attorney Pierce. Appreciate it. Last week, we heard reports on blight, recovery of costs related to properties with breaches of the peace, public disturbances, and disorderly conduct, and a report from the Joint Retirement Investment Board, which were items 4, 5, and 6. So we'll move on to item number 7, which is to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 18th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Carson, seconded by Representative Bastilli. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. Moving on, we have items 8 through 15 on our consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Representative Zezima and seconded by Representative Waldron. Is there any discussion from the body regarding the consent calendar? Seeing none. Anyone from the public? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. Those in favor of items on the consent calendar, 8 through 15, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? The consent calendar passes. We're going to move on to item number 16 on our agenda, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating Yes, number 15 was on the consent. 8 through 15 were all on the consent calendar from the agenda. Yep. Moving on to item number 16 on our agenda, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating an Additional $1,429,950 for costs related to construction, remediation, and addressing the notices of violation at Penfield Pavilion B and hereby is approved." Do I have a motion for this agenda item? Representative Representative Rock, seconded by Representative blanking out. Yeah. Someone else give me a second. I'm sorry, Zezima. Is there any discussion on this matter? Representative Barrett.
Steve Barrett's District 7. In a sign of true bipartisanship, I realize that most members of this body from both political parties will disagree with me. I do feel compelled to represent the citizens who agree with me and to give an explanation for my vote against putting more money towards the Penfield Pavilion. To make this simple, I want to break down what Penfield Pavilion actually is. It has 4 parts. 1/3 of the actual building is a combination of lifeguard station, snack bar, public bathrooms. Everyone agrees we need these. The other 2/3 of the actual building is a catering hall and private lockers. These 2/3 of the building is off limits to most Fairfielders unless you give the Parks and Rec Department some money. Even though these 2 parts of the building generate some revenue, they will never come close to paying off the building. The 4th part of the Penfield Pavilion is the outside picnic tables that look out on the water and are shaded. This is what the majority of people who use the pavilion want. I believe we can give the majority of the patrons what they want and need without the 2/3 of the building that requires staff, maintenance, and future expenditures. I believe we should knock down most of the building, put up a large shaded pavilion area in its place, and save money now and in the future. In March, I voted against the previous funding because I believe Penfield needs more beach and less building. I believe that last March, And I believe that 14 years ago, when I was the town's waterfront director and shared my opinions with my supervisor then. I believe that now as well. A person at the meeting last March talked extensively about this being an iconic Fairfield building. The Bronson Windmill, the Burr Mansion, the Penfield Lighthouse, and the Old Town Hall are all iconic Fairfield buildings. This is a 13-year-old building that has been closed for repairs for a quarter of its lifetime. I have T-shirts older than this building, and few people would call them iconic. I am a person who buys a car and drives it into the dirt. I do not trade my cars in every couple of years. When it's costing me more to keep the car running than makes sense, I sell it or trade it in. We, I believe, are at that point with the pavilion. I do feel badly for First Selectman Gerber. He inherited mistakes made by the previous administrations and now is trying to deal with it. He had the coastal study done and is following its findings and doing what he feels is best. My hope is he is right and I am wrong. Only time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Barrett. Is there any other comments? Representative Shea.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chris Shea, District 2. Just a clarification on the proposed pavilion plans. I just wanted to confirm that the plan that exists is going to keep the pavilion in compliance with FEMA regulations.
Thank you. First Selectman Gerber, do you want to?
Representative Shea, I just want to clarify, you're saying the rebuilt pavilion, will it be in compliance with FEMA regulations?
Yes.
So it will be compliant with FEMA regulations as they existed when the pavilion was built. It is not bringing it up to the current FEMA code, and it's not required to. Because that's sort of part of the importance of keeping the expenditures under the 50/50 threshold. But the current FEMA code would require, from my understanding, raising it up an additional foot. And I don't know the details, but I also understand that the windows don't meet the current wind shear requirements under the current code. So the reason we're allowed to, by FEMA, keep the height as it is because we're not, we will not exceed the 50/50 threshold for bringing it up to the current code.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? Great. Are there any other questions or comments? Representative McCabe.
Michelle McCabe, District 4. The RTM had only one opportunity to vote on the matter of Penfield Pavilion back in March in 2023, about a week before a deadline established by FEMA. I was on the RTM at the time, and in preparation for our vote today, I watched the over 3 hours of meeting and was reminded of the following. First, we were presented with one plan that involved removing and replacing beams under the pavilion bay by bay, and were assured that this was a solid course of action approved by FEMA and ready to go at a guaranteed cost. Second, we were presented with a plan that as of that moment, the town was unsuccessful in getting construction insurance to cover it. The prior administration contradicted what the Board of Finance had been told days before, that they couldn't find an insurer to cover it, and instead asserted that they had a bid for over $200,000 that they let expire because they were confident they could get a price closer to what they felt was the appropriate rate of around $150,000 or so. And third, the prior administration made it abundantly clear that they did not actively seek public input on what to do with Penfield Pavilion, despite a timeline articulated by them that would have allowed for a more engaged process. Why? Because again, as stated by the prior administration and others that night ad nauseum, the matter had already been litigated in the past, and they didn't consider the interest or input of new residents, new board members,
New circumstances in terms of climate change and increased risk of superstorms that may have in fact changed the perspective of the very people involved in the first 2 rounds of Penfield decision-making. And there was an overabundance of questions which indicated that they, quote, didn't have the votes, unquote, to pass their plan. And rather than allowing the public and the boards to consider multiple plans and determine the best one for the town, they ensured that it was their plan or no plan. I voted no, with the minority of other RTM members for all the reasons outlined above, joined by my colleague, Representative Barretts, who eloquently summarized his opposition and closed his statement with a hope that we would not see a request for more funding to sink into this compromised building, and that we would not be here to say that Steve was right. Well, Steve was right. Last week's RTM meeting, we have learned that the original plan for beam removal was speculative, reliant on studies that would take place after our vote, and sure enough wasn't going to work, and had to be substituted for another plan as articulated by First Selectman Gerber last week, and is costing the town more money. The construction insurance that was acquired after the March vote is now in fact almost at $400,000. And whereas we actually had a moment where we could have come together as a community and figured out a plan to build Penfield back better, we are now absolutely locked into moving forward with even demolition with a possible intent to rebuild off the table. I appreciate the new administration's willingness to thoughtfully and thoroughly answer our questions, and know from serving with then Representative Gerber last year on the RTM that this is not a situation that he wanted to confront now that he is our first selectman. Tonight, I am voting yes, sadly still holding the belief that continued investment in this particular version of a Penfield Pavilion is the wrong choice for Fairfield. However, thanks to the prior administration, it is our only choice.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Representative Astorita.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 1. Just a point of information for everybody here. On Wednesday, August 31st of 2022, a presentation was made to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the RTM with options regarding the Penfield Pavilion. Those included the rebuild, those included demolition. So to say that in essence, there was no time for discussion, I guess people don't count about the 5 or 6 months in between when those options were presented to this community. Just a couple of other things that I would like to point out. And for those of you that are new to this body, this is my 2nd term, and people who were here previously are probably sick and tired of hearing me say this, but the reason I got involved with town government was over the Penfield Pavilion issue, because as I had said many times, it became the confluence of corruption and competence in the management of this town. While I don't like the fact that we have to spend 11 or 12 million to rebuild it, we never should have been put in this because the building should have been built correctly according to the FEMA specifications as they were provided to the town at that time. I do think it is a valuable resource. I do think the people of the town get a lot of enjoyment at it. And as a result of that, I'm voting in favor of the additional expenditure. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Astorita. Representative Carson.
Laura Carson, District 4. Just as a point of information, Ken, at that informational meeting, I do believe Brenda said that she did present some options, and she said, I'm going to make the decision for everybody. I don't want to have the town fight each other. We went through this before. And she said, I'm going ahead with just this one option. This option is going to be to keep the building. So I do believe that is what happened, unless I'm wrong. I remember her specifically saying she's going to make the decision because she didn't want the fighting. So can tell me I'm wrong. I'd like to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carson. Representative Pistilli.
Sharon Bastilli, District 5. To follow up on Representative Carson's comments, demolishing the building or somehow otherwise altering the building to decrease the scope of the project, those were never brought before us as voting items.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Are there any other comments from members of the body? If you have a comment online from the body, please comment in the chat. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I live in the District 9. I live in the beach area. I've lived there 32 years. I lived through Irene. I lived through Sandy. I lived through the flood of 1992. I voted no in the spring on the one option that was given to us. I was not given an option on voting to demolish the building or to reduce the size of the building, which I would have supported in that August meeting, because I do believe this building is in harm's way and it is going to stay in harm's way. And I voted no because I think that we'll just end up pouring more money in it. I even made an amendment to reduce the scope of that project, which was voted down. And I will vote yes tonight because I do not want to see people like me, who was a non-compliant house, lose their discount that FEMA offers people who are required to have FEMA flood insurance or choose to have FEMA flood insurance. I am not happy that this building was bonded once. This building was bonded twice. Now this building is being funded by money that was basically put aside for remediation, and the remediation money is also being used as construction. But again, we don't have a choice. We're up against this FEMA deadline. We have to get this building compliant. So I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. First Selectman Gerber.
I don't know if I could take a moment of privilege for a second before I continue to the next topic, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the project manager on this project, Eli Gazal. He has worked incredibly hard with remediation. He's an extremely talented person, and he's probably learned more about building structures in the sand than he ever thought he would, but he's an expert now. So now we can build all up and, no, just joking. The other thing I wanted to point out was that Eli set up a meeting with myself and himself and other people in the administration with FEMA a few days ago, a few days ago. And their lack of trust in us was pretty apparent. They made it clear that when we start, they want pictures, regular pictures of the progress. Every time we start a new cell under the building, they want pictures. Every time we clear out the fill, they want pictures. And when we backfill it, they want pictures for each cell. So it's not really an option to delay. They mean business. And so that may be a question in some people's minds, could we stretch this out? The answer is absolutely not. They are putting us on a very tight time frame. Thanks.
Thank you, First Selectman Gerber. Representative Steele.
Jeff Steele, District 3. I want to also agree with what First Selectman Gerber just said. Eli Gonzal is very competent, and I was very impressed. I had a conversation with him recently, and I think we're in good hands with him. I mean, this is all about whether you want Penfield, obviously, and we don't have to rehash the past, which we kind of have done tonight already with blow by blow on past votes and everything else. We do need to do this. We want to keep Penfield. I'm in support of it. I think it is a modern icon in Fairfield now. I think it's a center point. I think the town, everyone in town, just about everyone enjoys the use of the pavilion and the beach. But I just want to address one quick item. It has been mentioned a couple times that we are where we're at because of the prior administration. And I don't think that's a fair assessment. I don't think that's correct. We're here because of the administration before that, with both fill pile and incompetence on building. Let's be clear on that.
Thank you, Representative Steele. Are there any other comments from the body? We'll move to the comments from the public. If you are online, you have a comment from the public, please put your name in the chat. If anyone in the public here would like to speak, just come up to the podium, state your name and your address. I can't see the chat. Is there any? The chat was taken down. Okay. Oh, now it's back. There's no one in the chat. Here, seeing no comments from the public, one last opportunity from the body. Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. I'm gonna just do an all-person vote, try not to spare Betsy, just I'll hesitate just to hear everyone online and make sure it's clear. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please state your name if you're online. Any abstentions? That was Nancy Donnie. That motion passes. 37-1-1. Moving on to item number 17, to form the RTM Special Committee on Energy Initiatives. Do I have a motion to approve? Representative Carson, seconded by Representative Havey. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, let's take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item number 18, to consider and act upon any other matters presented to said meeting and which may be properly acted upon under the rules of the representative town meeting. Seeing none, I will take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Representative Wolk, seconded by Representative Longo. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 This meeting is adjourned. We'll see everyone in February. Thank you.